episode of China Unscripted. The Cold War with China has a new battleground. And that battleground is pandas. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm totally looking at the wrong place. Where am I looking? Okay.
Camera one.
Let's keep going.
With the teleprompter.
This is reality. This is reality of a team that is cranking out YouTube videos nonstop for 11 years.
You know the sad thing is that I forgot that the teleprompter was like, so I could see us in the camera. And then I was like, I'm looking at the wrong camera.
Don't tell them it's a teleprompter and this whole thing is actually scripted.
Well, we don't use it except for looking at the guest.
Really? Then what am I reading?
Well, my point was there's no guest to look at today. So I was looking into the right camera and going, wait, I'm looking into the wrong camera because all I see is us. I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're off to a great start.
We are. Okay. Oh, and I'm Matt Ganesh.
Thank you. I almost forgot.
I didn't say who I was.
Who are you, Shelley?
Did I say? I can't remember. Oh, gosh.
I think you said 24601.
Okay. Okay,
Come on.
thanks.
Come on.
I'm
That
Jean
was great.
Valjean. Yes.
I got to arrest you then and spend the rest of my life tracking you down because a criminal never changes.
And then you sing a very heartfelt ballad about the stars and then jump off a bridge?
The suicide happens later.
Later. Okay.
Great musical. So I want to start off the podcast with some good news.
Okay.
Because we'll have lots of bad news to talk about later, but the good news is America is finally panda free.
Oh, you're going to start with that. Okay.
Yes, that's the best news. From sea to sea, panda free.
I'm sorry, Chris, you're wrong. There's still pandas in the Atlanta Zoo.
Damn it! Damn it! This country. We used to have a country.
Yeah.
Well, at least there's fewer pandas.
The Washington, D.C. Smithsonian Zoo gave the pandas back to China.
Well, probably China demanded them back.
Yes.
It's like reverse panda diplomacy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the panda diplomacy. Like, you know, hey, you be nice to China. We give you these stupid bears people like to look at for some reason.
Because they're pretty adorable, at least when they're babies. Come on, baby panda cubs are pretty cute. Like, not when they're just born. When they're just born,
they're like those little pink,
like they look like a little,
body horror things.
Yeah, but after they grow fur, like, they're pretty cute.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing I think about pandas. So when China loans pandas to the U.S., they still belong to China, but their offspring, according to these rules that the U.S. agreed to, their offspring also belong to China.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the U.S. The whole world agreed to this.
Yeah, and I think that's terrible because the U.S. has birthright citizenship for humans. So we should at least have it for pandas. So we should be able to keep any pandas born in the United States.
Or at least the pandas should be able to choose.
I am not sharing my citizenship with a panda.
But they're cute.
Why does everyone think that?
I mean, they're objectively adorable. I think actually
objectively adorable.
No,
they're objectively cute.
Scientifically proved that.
Actually,
Shelley.
many years ago, I was at the Smithsonian Zoo when the original pandas. I think one of them had died, but like Ling Ling was still alive.
Well, that's
or whatever.
good news.
And like this was when we were kids, and they actually had an exhibit that showed why people find pandas to be cute. And it has a lot to do
CCP propaganda.
With like the way their eyes look
like it has to do with their
the fur color.
the face shape is like more rounded than like a lot of bears, and then like the eye, the black around the eyes, like it
makes it look like they have big eyes, and the larger heads compared to the bodies also is a cuteness factor.
That's ridiculous. You know what I think is who I think is cute? William Dafoe. Nice, small, beady eyes, narrow face,
craggy, like
adorable. Why can't we have William Dafoe diplomacy?
I think there's only one William Dafoe is the problem.
That's what makes it so good. It's scarcity. It's like, hey, if you get William Dafoe,
that was the panda thing, right? It was scarcity until they started kind of like making a panda industry and like manufacturing pandas and shipping them off to all these.
Are they able to get them to breed? I thought that was
next they are
impossible.
That actually was so. Basically, the problem with that is that they were just assuming that like any male and any female panda, they just put them together. And if they didn't breed, then pandas didn't like to breed. But actually, apparently, in a lot of cases, is that they didn't like each other. So, like, they actually, when they kind of started control for, like, seeing if the pandas were compatible, then that, helped the breeding problem.
And there's one panda, I forget his name, who like sired like 50 offspring.
Yeah, there's this one panda in China who just became like this panda Lothario, where he was just the panda Casanova. He just has a bunch of offspring because he was able to breed with a lot of females.
He liked them. I gotta admire that. I guess.
But yeah, it is interesting though, because the like removal of the pandas from the Smithsonian is kind of, I was thinking about how it's almost like the pandas were the original Belt and Road Initiative
Mhm.
in some ways, where it was kind of like the China was like, okay, we have these pandas and we will share them with the world. And then instead of like, so the first pandas to the US Smithsonian Zoo in the 70s under Nixon, they were a gift.
Mhm.
And then they stopped doing that and they started just loaning pandas out to zoos across the world. And then
They're expensive.
yeah, it was
And
like
they-
$1 million a year in fees or something like
Uh-huh.
that.
And they charge interest on the pandas because if they produce offspring, they also belong to China.
And I think you have to pay for like the birth of pandas. Like if
Right.
if the new pandas are born under your care, you have to pay China more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was worth it for the zoos because they got enough of an uptick in people wanting to go see pandas, and they could sell panda merch and do all this
Yeah.
stuff.
But now you can replace pandas with artificial intelligent panda robots.
Or William Dafoe.
William Dafoe just goes to Germany and then Atlanta and then
Little
San Diego.
William Dafoe dolls.
Yeah,
Give
that
to
sounds
your children.
adorable. Yeah, emaciated William Dafoe dolls.
Am I the only one who thinks I like the cut of his jib?
Okay, yeah. You and Madonna.
Really?
There was it was a movie that William Dafoe and Madonna were in where like I can't
Strange. I didn't know about that.
I can't remember, but essentially she seduced him.
In the movie.
Mm.
Okay.
Anyway.
Wow.
So pandas were the original Belt and Road, where, at first everyone was like, cool, pandas. Yes. Like, it was the soft power thing. And then they started to be like, actually, these loan terms kind of suck. And then when the CCP was mad at you, they could take the pandas back.
Which they're pretty mad at us, I imagine.
Yeah. But like, not just the US, but like there have
Anyway.
been, problems with other countries and pandas. So then it kind of becomes like, do we really want the pandas?
When somebody meets with the Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama is cuter than pandas. So I think get rid of the pandas, keep the Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama does have a lot of soft power for one old, Buddhist guy.
Yeah. More than you can say about most old Buddhist guys.
True.
Yes.
True.
So what you're saying is that the Smithsonian Zoo should invite the Dalai Lama to come and like host him give a speech or something, and that will solidify that. Like basically, we are going to retaliate for the taking back of the pandas.
No, the
No.
Smithsonian's screwed. They're going to lose a bunch of money by not having some stupid pandas, which I think is a good thing, because if anything I have learned over the years is that when those exhibits come to life at night in museums, they're a menace.
I'm pretty sure the pandas are already alive.
Can you call that living?
I mean, they do have a pretty cushy side. Actually, one interesting thing with the pandas going away is that, people have been talking about that on Twitter or X or whatever, and I don't look at it that much anymore. But, looking for this podcast, I found out that there's apparently a lot of propaganda in China claiming that, the US was mistreating the pandas.
Really?
Yeah. Like,
If only if I were in charge, it
But
would be true.
people were, tweeting this because people would talk about the pandas and there would be a bunch of kind of like, who knows if they're bots or just like pro CCP tankies or,
Mhm.
but like replying with like photos of this panda who was supposedly like losing fur off his back when he was in the US. He was being mistreated. And the after panda, like, super happy to be back in China.
His motherland.
Yeah. So it was interesting. And that narrative was actually in several of the threads and replies I saw where people were like, yeah, the US mistreats the pandas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
you-
really, that is like how the CCP treats overseas Chinese people, that they all belong to them. And you would be happier if you were back in China.
Now, I don't know if you
Your
guys.
fur would grow back.
If I was in China.
Yes.
Hmm.
I was going to say, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a zoo in China, but I was in I went to 2 different zoos in mainland China. One was in Beijing and one was in Lhasa. And both of them were pretty awful. The Lhasa one was terrifyingly poor conditions. And they weren't panda bears, they were black bears, and they were in a concrete pit that was maybe
Please, Matt, bear of color. Thank you.
it was like a 10 by 10 meter pit that was sunk maybe 5 meters down. Let's call them yards because this is America. And it was just a concrete floor with a couple like semicircular pits dug into it. There was no vegetation. There was no like water. Like it was so weird and kind of just awful to see these animals stored essentially in these like concrete cases. And so that's my impression of zoos in China. And
Did they look happy, the animals?
they looked absolutely miserable.
I mean, I have to
years
say,
ago.
All the animals in the zoo looked miserable. The monkeys were like playing in this like dirty fountain with trash that people had thrown in, and there was no effort to clean it up. It was just there was feces everywhere. It was really bad. Like I couldn't believe the conditions that they put animals in.
I remember years ago we did an episode about like the wild world of Chinese zoos. I think that's what the episode was called, and it's like a compilation of all these horrible instances. There was like some zoo where they like put like some monkeys and maybe a tiger or a bear on like little tricycles and had them race.
yeah, I've seen the tricycle bear
And
thing.
then obviously
Yeah.
the predator jumps off and eats the monkeys.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty bad. I mean the one in Beijing was less bad, but it
I
was
mean-
still not even on par with the quality in terms of treating animals with dignity. There's nothing comes close to the American zoos.
I mean, I think the pandas get treated a little better because they are, the original Belt and Road Initiative soft power thing that they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you talked about the concrete pits, have you seen parks in China?
Yes, they're concrete pits.
It's not a country that prizes vegetation.
All
Well,
animals are equal in China.
Well, they don't have a lot of grass in the parks because I think the government thinks there are too many people and they would just wreck the grass anyway. So why bother?
Well, I mean, also in the Cultural Revolution, they said grass was bourgeois, and they sent the kids out to rip up the grass instead of going to school.
Actually,
and it kept growing back.
there was a university I was touring in Beijing, the Beijing Normal University, and they had grass, and it was actually very lush, but no students were like walking or sitting on the grass because they felt like they were not allowed to do that. I'm not sure if it was a rule or what, but like it was pretty weird, and no one hung out on grass.
And it's the normal university, you say?
It was the Normal University, for training normal people to be teachers.
A normal communist. That's an oxymoron.
I mean, there is that thing in communist like architecture where they do prize these like giant concrete squares.
The kind of
right?
brutalism thing. There's a lot of that in Boston, right? I seem to
Is
remember
there?
seeing like giant concrete boxes in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. There's also, it's not just the aesthetic, though. It's also the economics of it. At a certain point, when you're doing mass construction of like large apartment units, this sort of steel, rebar, and concrete structure is like, it's inexpensive and it's low maintenance. You don't even have to paint it.
Yeah,
No.
no, I was thinking of like Red Square and like Tiananmen Square, like the idea that there's something majestic about these giant open squares so that you can parade your armies through them.
Oh, you don't mean the buildings. You mean the
Yeah.
actual just flat. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking about concrete parks, basically.
Yeah. I haven't been to Red Square, but Tiananmen Square is, I mean, it's really huge. Like even to cross like the short way is like, at least a 10-minute walk. Like it's really probably more now with all the fencing they put up. It's a lot of concrete.
Well, I think that's a great transition into our to one of our actual topics. And we can forget about pandas, that they exist.
I'm not going to forget about pandas.
You keep those thoughts to yourself.
I actually feel bad for the pandas
Oh, we're still talking about the pandas.
because, I mean, essentially they are kind of, maybe it's because I'm Chinese American that I feel this affinity with the pandas.
They're being
you know?
used as pandas.
I like that. I like that.
Okay.
I know. I like that.
If it made Chris like it better, it made me like it worse.
Pandas.
Pandas.
I like that. Let's use that in an
T-shirt.
episode. They're pandas. Let's make a T-shirt with a panda and like in big angry red letters.
Would you buy that T-shirt? Please comment below. No, I was gonna say, but it is almost emblematic, the soft power fail of like them taking back the pandas in a kind of it seems like this kind of like we're taking our toys and going home kind of way that
Mhm.
uh, kind of is what's going on with the CCP generally in the world now.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a huge shift in how people view the Chinese Communist Party. It just came out that, like, for the first time since they were keeping track of the data in 1998, that foreign investment in China has actually gone into the negative. That's a pretty huge shift. I mean, we've been encouraging that for 11 years, and
You
finally,
mean we on our shows have been encouraging that?
yes.
Yes. And finally, they're not listening to us, but the economic and political factors are pushing them out nonetheless.
I'd like to think they're listening to us.
Okay.
It's
Thank you for
because of
listening,
us, yes.
CEO of BlackRock. And
I mean, there are also the CEO of BlackRock is in some danger of being kidnapped when he's in China now. So not maybe the CEO of BlackRock, but definitely some lower level executives of BlackRock might.
For sure, yeah,
Yeah.
with their new their updated anti-espionage law. Yeah, this is the thing. More and more employees of foreign companies are being, if not arrested, exit banned, so they can't leave the country. Yeah, people are freaking out. There's lots of raids happening in companies. It's a bad time.
So maybe if foreign executives don't want to go make money in China, that's again not going to be that conducive to, you know, all this foreign direct investment anymore.
Yeah. Well, and so the transition I was going to make when we were talking about all those concrete buildings is like how China is dealing with this new economic reality. And one of the things that's happening is they're trying to basically like dump like steel and all these construction products on the market.
Also,
right, they want to export their way out of a recession.
Yeah.
which is
Thank you.
essentially what they've tried to do multiple times before. It's not a new thing, but this time
It's literally trying to dig your way out of a hole.
this time they might not be able to do it though. There was a Wall Street Journal article called "China's making too much stuff and other countries are worried," which at first I read the title and I was like, okay, and this is news to who? But apparently, like you said, they're doing it even more now because of the economic downturn.
Hmm.
And steel, also EVs, and cars in general, not just electric vehicles,
Solar panels.
wind turbines, like renewable
Yeah.
energy stuff, all the stuff that the Chinese government was essentially pushing businesses to get into in China. And then now they have all this excess capacity because nobody's going to buy all the stuff in China. So they're trying to dump the products overseas by cutting their prices. But now, like, the European Union is investigating, like, using like anti-probe investigations against their, electric vehicle exports to Europe and different things. Like, countries aren't happy about this.
Yeah, some of their tariffs are over 100%. That is, you're paying more than double because of the to get the imported Chinese stuff. Whereas typically tariffs like are less than 10%, right?
But
for
they're
other countries.
more than 100% because
the prices are so low. What would the Chinese government subsidizing these companies? Like, let's say an electric vehicle, a Chinese electric vehicle is worth 20,000 euros or something, right? But the essentially the Chinese exports are being priced at, say, 10,000 euros when they enter. So that's going to undercut any kind of European local manufacturing, right? And so then you add a tariff. So I think it was like 122%, something like that. So now instead of paying 10,000, which is the price that China's offering to undercut the market, you now have to pay $20,440. Did I get that right? Yeah, for that car. So now it's not worth it to buy that car. I mean, it might be worth it if you really want a Chinese electric vehicle for some reason, and still they are cheap for a reason,
Explosions.
Well, I mean, there's more to that than just the price savings. But at any rate, in terms of the tariffs, that has a huge impact, right? And they're doing this with a number of products. So basically, it stops. It basically makes all of the subsidized product dumping like not worthwhile for the Chinese government to do because consumers aren't going to buy it at higher rates.
Well, what I was thinking is that when we've been talking about decoupling of, recently, right, about how, foreign companies are looking at pulling out of China and we're looking at doing less trade, it's almost like the CCP is accidentally making this problem worse for themselves by dumping.
Yeah. I really don't know what their strategy is anymore because it seems like so many things are falling apart and they're not making the best decisions.
I mean, maybe it's just like you're just trying to bail out the sinking boat and you can't.
And it got to the point where it's like, well, this is going down.
Right. I mean, but you have to ask. So some people ask, like, well, why is it that Xi Jinping is going in this direction to like tighten political controls, tighten Communist Party control over the economy in different respects,
Tech industry,
push out foreign companies? Like, why doesn't he want to go back to the Jiang Zemin era of economic reform and openness?
Oh, I thought you were saying that as if you were going to answer.
I thought you were going to answer this question.
Well, I'd like to know what you guys think.
Well, I think part of it is that well, we'll get into his death in a bit, but Li Keqiang, former premier who is now dead, he famously got leaked in the U.S. Embassy cable that China's GDP numbers are man-made and unreliable. So I think the whole thing always was an illusion. It was just like it was digging a hole, just using debt and credit, subsidies from state-owned companies, and it just worked for a little bit. Well, it actually worked for like 2 decades.
2 decades, yeah.
2 decades. But it was all fake, and eventually this was going to happen. So it's not like you can go back to when you first started digging the hole, because now the hole's deep.
Interestingly, one of the Substacks I subscribe to is by this guy, Matt Turpin. He runs a free Substack called Matt Turpin's China Articles, where he just does like a weekly roundup of different China articles. And he said something in his last one from last week about how it was about how the Commerce Department is being set up to put up through all these regulations to essentially deal with these issues coming from China, like AI issues, like the chip technology exports. And like the Commerce Department is essentially becoming, in a way, the front line of the Cold War between the U.S. and China.
Oh, interesting.
And his point was, he says, like, the commercial landscape is where the battles of the new Cold War are playing out. And I thought that was really interesting, because that's not, you didn't see that in the same way with the Soviet Union, because their economy was pretty terrible for a lot longer than, and it was kind of propped up by all of these other like communist countries, satellite countries and things like that. But
kind of sucking the wealth.
Yeah, but because
redistributing the wealth.
The CCP managed to do that with the whole world, right? In terms of like, the foreign direct investment is what's really giving the money so that the Chinese government can subsidize real estate or manufacturing or all these things. And now that is starting to dry up, they're seeing all these problems. And it's interesting to think that, okay, when we talk about, the whole like free trade globalization 90s and into the early 2000s, like that whole system is now kind of breaking apart. And, it's not that the U.S. is being mean to China or other countries are being mean to China, but that the CCP is doing a lot of the stuff, like you mentioned, Matt, with what Xi Jinping is doing about more control over private companies, re-empowering state-owned enterprises, like over private businesses.
Right. And as Chris pointed out, more crackdowns on foreign companies in China, such as like labeling their like normal data as like state secrets and then going after them. It's kind of scary to be a foreign company now in China when you're dealing with that environment where like your competitors in the country are increasingly state controlled. Like they're going to be favored on anything, any kind of like, civil disputes.
Because the legal system is entirely controlled by the state.
So there's just like it was already kind of a narrow space to make money in China, frankly, 10 years ago. But now it's gotten narrower and narrower and narrower. And there's probably very, very few companies that are going to make any money in China, if, 5 years from now. Even today, I think it's already getting quite close to the end of that path. But I mean, maybe McDonald's or something. But even then, you never know what's going to happen.
I'm thinking about Russia nationalizing McDonald's now.
Yeah, I mean, look, it could happen, right? Like, there could be a thing where China, because they nationalized during the beginning of COVID, they nationalized a bunch of U.S. owned factories.
They didn't put it like that, but that was the effect of what they did by restricting them from exporting face masks back to the U.S. Like 3M couldn't export their own masks back to the U.S.
Right. So maybe McDonald's will no longer be able to export its profits back to the U.S. Like, whatever it is. I mean, that's not going to exactly work out.
World War III. It's really going to be the fast food wars. It's going to be American McDonald's versus Chinese-controlled McDonald's.
Really?
Yeah. That's a prediction.
I feel like that's a video game.
A video game. I'll keep that in mind for deep thoughts about gaming.
It'll be like the Chinese McDonald's is the one with the 3 arches.
Why 3 arches?
I don't. Oh, you maybe didn't see that photo. We'll put it on screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
I remember that one from. Yep.
Yeah. But it's interesting how China's they're saying they're going to fix the economy by. Well, they say it's not actually a problem what's happening in state media. They're saying it's just we're switching to this new high tech industry. This is like the modernization of China, and it seems like a real stretch to think that China is going to be able to create this kind of high tech field.
I mean, they tried to, right?
Yeah, I mean that was a whole made in.
Remember Made in China 2025, and that was launched in 2015, I believe, and we're close to 2025 now, and it has been very much downplayed in terms of how they actually talk about it, but essentially they're still trying to make that happen.
Well, and it's the way they're approaching is very similar to how they just we got to pump up the real estate sector. Let's just build a bunch of things, even if nobody's going to live in it. So they're talking about building these robots to handle all these jobs. And it's like they have a horrible unemployment crisis right now.
But someone has to make the robot. I mean, what's going to happen is a bunch of companies are going to get subsidies from the government to build robots, and 9 out of 10 of them are going to be total busts. I mean, that's probably being generous.
Could be very funny. Some janky Chinese made robot.
I mean, maybe they won't even make robots. They'll just steal AI. They'll just have AI photos of robots and claim that they made these robots. That's the kind of stuff that happens.
I mean, this is what happened with microchips, right? Whereas the Chinese government subsidized all these companies to make microchips. A lot of them got the subsidies because their CEOs, they started a company in order to get subsidies, and they had connections with the right people. So they took the money, started a factory, but they didn't have the expertise. They didn't have the skilled labor.
They would hire white monkeys to make it look more legitimate.
Yeah, and so the great majority of these chip companies essentially failed to produce chips of any real value, just because of this. When you have government subsidized companies, you're not going to get as good a result as when you have actual competition, because in a competition you have a meritocracy, and the best quality, best production rises to the top, right?
Yeah, I think that this kind of model worked a little bit when it was a different type of manufacturing, right?
Like lower end.
Lower end. So you could have the town in China that only makes lingerie, and everybody makes lingerie.
That's a fun town.
Or, there's that town that makes knockoff paintings. The one where they will paint replicas of Starry Night or something, to sell abroad. The town that just makes buttons, whatever, they do that. But that's okay to do with zippers or buttons, or apparently even hand-painted paintings, but doesn't work with microchips or robots.
Yeah, cutting-edge technology.
Yeah, but also China kind of needs to move in that direction, because they've spent the last 20 years trying to get all this younger generation into college and get these more advanced degrees that are essentially subsidized by the government. But those people don't want to take a factory job making buttons. They want a job in something they feel they're qualified for, like higher tech stuff. And that's part of what's the unemployment crisis, because those jobs, the jobs did not catch up with the education. And part of that is because Chinese Communist Party is not actually letting real competition happen because it's too politically risky for them.
And this was a point I think it was made by David Stilwell when he had him on recently. But so for like these young people in China, it's not like, people could say, well, they can go into the military. But like according to David Stilwell, is the military in China is not like this platform, this meritocracy where you can rise up and get higher social status.
It's always been like people look down on people in the military.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's as bad now as if it was a while ago. I think Lao Wai actually did a video about this like a few years ago. But essentially, like if you have somebody in like your son goes into the military, that's just seen as like, oh, I guess he couldn't do anything else,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like serving the country like there's that, that view here in the United States, largely.
Well, even outside of that, there's no social advancement. It's not like you're going to become, like all of these young people were promised a better life by going to college. It's not like in the U.S. where like if you're a college educated service member, you have opportunities.
Right. And there's also just greater respect for you, people appreciate your service to the country. And then the other factor is that in China, of course, like in most families still have only one child, right? Because the decades
everybody whose kids are in their 20s and 30s, they're all one children.
Pretty much, except for there's some exceptions with minority groups, but like, yeah. So like what parent and what grandparents want to send their only offspring into the military, especially when you're like on the precipice of war over Taiwan or the US?
Because the war economy could be another option for the Chinese Communist Party. Just, take their manufacturing and start manufacturing more ships and airplanes and stuff. Except they don't have the high-tech stuff to make actually good equipment.
Can I just say from an economic perspective, the idea of a war economy really doesn't hold up. And the idea that wartime is good for the economy comes from World War II, where the U.S. made a tremendous amount of money because of producing, weapons and food and clothing and other supplies for Europe before the U.S. entered the war. So our allies were buying like our weapons and our supplies, giving us tons of gold in exchange for that. And it ramped up U.S. manufacturing, getting all this foreign direct investment, essentially. But if you look at the other wars that the U.S. was involved in, where it wasn't like some ally paying us money, like we spent money because war is destructive economically, right? Like you're basically creating things that then get destroyed, right? So you're not creating things that last and have like long-term value. You're creating things that are essentially used in a destructive process. So it's ultimately a loss if you're trying to fund your own war. On the surface, you're ramping up certain manufacturing, right? But that money has to come from somewhere. So yeah, it's a really short-term thinking to try to create a war economy.
What about that whole military industrial complex kind of thing? I think they're not hurting for money.
They're not hurting for money, but think about how much of the U.S. discretionary budget goes to the military. I don't remember off the top of my head, but outside of entitlements, I think it's something like a third goes to military-related stuff. But that's not like profit from consumer spending. It's because our money is being taken from us by the government in the form of taxes and then used to, fund the military industrial complex. And I'm not saying that like it's bad to have a military, but that's where the money comes from, right? It's like people involved in profitable ventures and small businesses and jobs, middle-class people, their savings are being taken and used to fund this. So I don't think that's a creative process. I think it's ultimately a destructive process economically. And while every country does need to have a military, it's just a bad economic assumption. It just doesn't hold up to say creating a domestic wartime economy is going to be good long term. It's just not. There's no way to justify that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, that being said, a lot of leaders, A, may not understand this, but B, they may understand it, but because it works for a few years, it may still be worth it.
Especially in China's case, where their whole thing is just kick the can down the road.
Well, I mean, that's the case everywhere. Even in democracies where Like a U.S. president is only is president for 4 to 8 years. So you need to do really well in that period. And then after that, it's not really your problem as much.
That's also the issue with CEOs. That's actually a lot of why we have the issue we have with foreign companies, U.S. companies in China, because it was a situation where, the CEO needs to show he makes a profit, increases business, so he gets his fat bonus and leaves.
Right.
And a lot of that was going to China, where he can show on paper, like, oh, this increased this much.
And you retire after 3 years of that, you get your golden parachute, which is often worth tens of millions.
Which is not helpful if you jump out of a plane.
That's true.
And then, China has stolen the company's IP and runs them out of business after that CEO has safely retired.
Right. So, yeah.
But not so safely jumped out of a plane.
I forget where we were. Oh, yeah. Well, so China's trying to build this wartime economy. And it's ultimately, even if it succeeds in the short term, it's going to fail in the long term.
What is the long term, though?
In order for it to not fail, like China's military has to essentially conquer enough that it, like this is not actually how it would play out. But let's say the CCP built up its huge military and successfully took over Taiwan with no pushback, and was now able to be completely in control of this really, really good economy, right? Then they've gained something, right? They've gained this economy.
Or that also getting control of the South China Sea and all the shipping that goes through there. If they could actually tax or levy
you have say,
there.
For every $1 trillion worth of shipping, instead of promoting free trade, they promote a tax, right? So maybe they tax 10%. So now they're getting $100 billion for. It's probably because it's like $5 trillion a year that goes through there. So we're talking about $500 billion they could collect in taxes at that rate. So again, yeah, that's profitable. So that is how war is profitable, right? You conquer and you get something else that belonged to somebody else, and you take it from them, and now it's yours. So it's stealing, but it's war, so it's not called stealing.
That's how most of human history was.
It is how most of human history was until World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And after World War II, the sort of national leaders got together and pretty much agreed that might makes right, that idea that had been the case throughout history, that the stronger country deserves to take the weaker country. That's no longer a legitimate way to gain territory, and that you have to do it through other means, diplomatic means.
Well, and the U.S. also promoting and protecting international trade with its massive military.
Right. And protecting other countries' sovereignty, for example, South Korea. So, like, we live in the last 70 years, like we've been in a new
They call it the
world
Pax
order.
Americana.
Yeah. And so, but China, the Communist Party never agreed to this, right? Their view is that might makes right. And so that is a fundamental ideological problem.
They're much more traditional.
Yeah. Well, okay. If that's the world that you want to live in, then move to China or Taiwan and you'll see. But in terms of the wartime economy, that's how it succeeds. And if it doesn't achieve those things, if China builds up a wartime economy, tries to take Taiwan and fails, and I believe they will fail, then it's an enormous loss economically, not to mention the massive political fallout, because Xi Jinping will be humiliated. Maybe the Communist Party as a whole will be humiliated. The military will be humiliated. I mean, it could cause all sorts of political fallout. So that's what I see. It's short-term thinking.
I think that's a very interesting point. You've given me an idea for another Deep Thoughts while gaming. I'll just say that much right now.
Well, yeah, this is a good time to pitch that show that we've done is Gamers Unbeatens.
That's
Gamers
true.
Unbeatens. I can't even say it right.
Beat games.
We have an awesome new channel,
Gamers Unbeaten.
And Chris hosts these episodes. How would you describe Deep Thoughts while gaming?
The way I've been kind of describing it is, YouTube censorship is a problem. So we can talk about controversial or too sensitive issues by hiding them in gaming content.
But there's some really interesting concepts, right? Like, what was it how Street Fighter 2 represents globalization.
Or how Taiwan is using a civilization strategy to beat China. Yeah, check it out. It's a lot of fun.
It's something about Kirby and communism.
No, that's
No.
Kirby and the Death Drive because he consumes everything.
Oh, right. Okay.
The communism one was about, was it called Cult of the
Cult of the
Lamb?
Lamb. Yeah.
Which was the freakiest game I've ever seen that involves
Cute little-
like cute little animals.
Oh, wait till we play more games, shall
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But that's our most popular segment on the channel. So go check it out, Gamers Unbeaten on YouTube.
Well, so now let's talk about the APEC summit.
Yeah. So that's being held
Next week.
This week.
Yes. We were recording this on Friday. So
But as of when you're seeing this, it's this week, so from the 15th to the 17th in San Francisco. And APEC is where you have, I think, 21 countries or something are involved. And
There can't be that many countries in the world.
just
these are like Asia Pacific countries.
plus the US.
Well, the U.S. is a Pacific country.
well, true, but we have Hawaii. And a
And
bunch
California and Oregon and
well, okay, that's
Washington.
not what they mean when they say Asia Pacific. Like, it's not
I
really
know,
about
but-
like Oregon
but-
trading with.
But like the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, like all have this like Pacific border, right? And a lot of Latin America. But that's not the point. The point is APEC summit. All these leaders are coming. They've got, like 1,200 CEOs of different companies.
Well, to counter what you said, Matt, where is it being hosted?
San Francisco.
In the Pacific border country. It's the West Coast is Pacific,
Right.
to be specific.
So yes, but that bolsters my point.
But the West Coast is not why the U.S. is in APEC. But
No, but
Wait, who am I arguing against? Did you make that point, Shelley, or did you, Matt?
no, Matt was defending the U.S. being in APEC based on
based on our
the
Pacific maritime border.
Oh, okay. Then I agree with you, Matt. Shelley. It's being held in San Francisco, Pacific,
Okay,
not
whatever.
Hawaii.
So at any rate,
I really didn't listen to either of you just then, I guess.
well, so you have world leaders coming to this, as well as a bunch of CEOs and different like thought leaders or whatever, right? Coming.
That's why I'm going.
There's a dinner with Xi Jinping where
Hold on. You're jumping to the thing where first we need to talk about the
talk
fact
about
that
the thing.
Biden and Xi are going to meet for the first time in a year
Yes.
at the APEC summit. The last time they met was at the G20, I think, in Bali.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember which G it was, but it was the G20 in Bali.
It's the OG, right?
there's
They
there's
took
a-
their G6,
there is the G8. And anyway.
the G7 because of Russia.
Oh yes, now it's the G7.
Oh, God, there's all these different G spots. Anyways.
No. Okay.
Anyways, yes, it's
so
been-
Biden and Xi Jinping
it's
are
been
going
this
to
big
meet
thing.
this week.
Big thing, like Biden trying to talk to Xi. There's been this diplomatic freeze, except for stupid Governor Newsom getting to meet with Xi Jinping. That guy's going to run for president. He's going to kill Biden, and he's going to run for president.
Oh, like he's not going to run for president in the future. He's going to run for president next year.
Yeah. Right now, I'm wondering. I think it might be Trump versus Newsom, the battle of the hairs.
Neither hair. It's like the battle of the 80s hair.
The best.
Anyway, so it was just announced Friday that Biden and Xi will meet at the APEC summit.
So that's like a big breakthrough. But then there's also like, oh, hey, this, we've invited this genocidal dictator.
I think the thing is, it's not necessarily terrible that Biden and Xi meet.
Mhm.
It's more about what did we
Craven
agree
desperation.
to, for the meeting. Like, did we go begging for them to meet, or like if it's just kind of like the two leaders meet? I mean, it's kind of a symbol more than anything, because it's not like Biden and Xi are going to have a breakthrough on Taiwan.
No,
Just
no.
the two of them talking or something like
And
that.
it does come in the context of the House Oversight Committee subpoenaing Hunter Biden and James Biden, Joe Biden's brother, about the accusation that they laundered $40,000 to Joe Biden of communist China money.
Yeah.
So that's just also kind of in the collective consciousness mix of all of this.
Well, I think
This
that
meeting.
they've been trying to push this meeting for a long time, the Biden administration. Now, the question is, with the way that things have been going economically in China versus the U.S., is it going to be the U.S. asking China to play nice, or is it going to be China being like, hey, don't continue to tariff us? You know what I mean?
I think undoubtedly this year the U.S. is in a stronger position than China, although I would argue that that's actually been the case for the last 70 years, that the U.S. is in a stronger position than China.
How does the Biden administration perceive it?
And that's what's key, right? If we perceive ourselves as being in a position of strength, then we can have this meeting from a position of strength. And instead of giving concessions, we wait for the Chinese leadership to ask something from us, which we can choose to give or not, because they need us more than we need them. And that is clearer now than it was a few years ago.
But you still have this coterie of people who are trying to get things to go back to quote unquote normal.
The good days.
Yeah. So this is what you were referring to earlier, Matt, that Xi Jinping is slated to address U.S. business leaders, right, during his visit to San Francisco.
So you can pay $2,000 for to dine with Xi Jinping, but you're not going to sit at his table. You'll be in the room somewhere.
Yeah, to sit at his table, $40,000. You can purchase 8 seats at a table plus 1 seat at Mr. Xi's table.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so this is
Why have we not done that?
Then you could finally get that interview with Xi Jinping.
I don't know if we have that money, but we could have been doing a crowdfunding raiser or something.
Because this news only broke today.
But we are recording on Friday. This happened.
So this news broke the day that we recorded.
So if we have the fastest fundraiser possible, I could be dining with Xi Jinping next week. Which will be this week by when you're watching this.
Well, so the reception is hosted by the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations and the U.S.-China Business Council. So
they wouldn't even let us.
I'm not sure they would let you join.
I am a co-owner of a small American business.
That's true. But these are essentially quite pro.
Is my $40,000 not as good as these pro CCP businesses?
I don't think they're going to be hurting for people.
Yeah, probably. We also don't have $40,000.
More than the entire year.
I don't think we have $2,000 to even sit in the room.
What would be the point? You really think Xi
Streaking?
Oh, now they're
doing a disruptive protest.
Yeah. I don't see that as being disruptive. I think if anything, that would help heal the divide between Xi Jinping. Will be like, oh wow.
Well, how would that heal the divide, Chris?
I mean, come on.
All right. Well, now I'm totally derailed.
Yeah. So also leading up to this meeting is the U.S. is concerned that because of China's military aggression and maritime militia aggression in the South China Sea, that accidents could happen, triggering, a boots on the ground type conflict. But U.S. military to military cooperation ended, a year ago or something.
Yeah, I don't know if they're talking.
The U.S. had sanctioned some Chinese general, and then China was like, we're not going to cooperate. And then I don't think we should do joint military drills with China.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
But it's good to have channels open so that when, some incident happens, you have the two high-ranking decision makers who can get on the phone immediately and walk back something if there was, to figure out how to resolve in a non-confrontational way an incident. Because sometimes it's an accident. And you don't want accidents to start a war. You want to start a war on purpose.
Didn't military communications restart recently?
Oh, not that I'm aware of.
There was an Axios scoop that says that Biden and Xi Jinping are preparing to announce the resumption of military-to-military communications this week. So that's what I saw.
Right. I mean, that is as much of an advantage for China as it is for the U.S., right? Because China's the country that's going to be doing things that are most likely to create an incident.
Yeah, they're specifically harassing U.S., Filipino.
Right. And they do careless things, right? Like fly their jets, 10 meters away from the wing of like some other jet.
So I don't know how much this military to military communication is really helping.
No, I'm
No,
not
there
saying it's
hasn't.
helping.
There hasn't been any. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. Well, what I'm saying is like, let's say, the U.S. is doing like a reconnaissance flight over the South China Sea, and the Chinese PLA Air Force like flies dangerously close and clips the wing, like happened in 2001.
The Hainan Island
right.
incident.
And what you want is for the head of the U.S. Air Force and the head of the PLA Air Force to get on the phone right away and figure out how to resolve this without the next step being the U.S. sends a whole bunch of airplanes and naval ships in to attack because they think that we're being attacked.
Wouldn't the flip side of that be like, oh, there's the conversation, they de-escalate things, and then China knows, oh, hey, we can have our aircraft slam into U.S. aircraft and say, oh, it was an accident, and just talk it down.
Yes, if there's no repercussions. So like the repercussion of that happening is like, you don't want the repercussion to be war. That starts accidentally. You do want that issue to be resolved. And then the U.S. says, okay, because you did this, we are now going to sanction all jet engines exports to China or whatever it is. That's like a major retaliation that says, hey, you're still punished for your stupid actions, but we're not going to actually go to war when that's not what we want. Because we don't, like, it's not actually good to go to war with China. We just need to have our military be strong enough to stop China from being aggressive. Doesn't that make sense?
I don't know. I mean, like, I've also heard you say this about like the UN, how like we need to have these authoritarian countries there so we can talk to them. And like, I don't know, something about that. I don't have an argument against it yet, but it doesn't seem to, something seems off about it.
I don't think that the authoritarian countries should have power at the UN, and they have more power now than they should. I'm just saying that like, it's good to have dialogue often because at least there's an opportunity to have that dialogue.
Well, if they don't have power, why would they be there?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem. The UN is a whole mess, and we could do an entire podcast about the problems with the United Nations.
Sounds like fun.
I think so.
Shelley.
I want to talk about pandas again.
I can see why you wanted to save that till the end, but I mean,
the pandas.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I think I can bring it back around because we were talking about, the Chinese economy and the economic slowdown and how, in times past, they've basically like tried to ramp up their exporting, their manufacturing exports to make up for the economy. I feel like, so over the last 2 decades, China has essentially ramped up their panda economy, their panda export economy. Because once they figured out, well, not just the last 2 decades, but that's essentially panda diplomacy has been going on a lot more since the 90s. But I think that now that they're recalling their pandas, it is possible that they're going to have too many pandas. And then soon that they will be incentivized to export pandas at cut rate prices.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they're going to start culling them.
No, you got...
No, they have to export their excess panda capacity.
Yeah. And
just
then,
like they do with steel and solar panels and EVs.
And then, maybe their next soft power move will be to, you could adopt your own panda from China.
Oh, but then they're going to get loose and they're going to breed, and then they'll be like rats or pigeons. There'll just be pandas everywhere in America. You'll have to, it'll be like hunting those boars in Texas. You get to fly in helicopters with machine guns and shoot the pandas.
I'm pretty sure the pandas aren't going to be like raising like American crops to the ground. They pretty much...
they would raise, pandas are a menace. They would destroy this country if they had the opportunity.
I don't really know if I could have grounds to disagree with that. But
I mean, I'm just saying that I think this is going to come back around.
I haven't seen evidence that wild pandas are extremely destructive. Although sometimes in like Sichuan province, wild pandas do, like they'll go to someone's like property and they'll like eat their food. Sometimes they even eat meat, like pandas. They're not just going to eat bamboo; they'll eat meat.
I think they have mauled people.
Yes, but I think that like most of the time they don't eat meat, but they will if they have to do it.
Right.
But that is an interesting point. They might start realizing pandas are their only option for saving the economy. And then, yeah, maybe America will actually own some pandas. And when we own them, we can do whatever we want with them.
Oh my gosh.
That's terrible, Chris.
Just saying.
Okay.
Thank you for watching China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganesta.
We'll talk to you next time.